Hi, welcome back. In this second lecture, we're finally going into the valuation using the delta neutral method or the delta hedging approach. So before I actually start with going into the details of delta neutral method, I thought I would just actually give you an overview of what delta hedging method or the delta neutral method is. So the first step is we construct a risk-free portfolio using a combination of options and shares. Okay. Now remember, both options as well as shares are actually risky instruments. They're not risk-free instruments, but we combine options and shares in different proportions to give us a risk-free portfolio, right? So the first step is we use a combination of shares and options to construct a risk-free portfolio. Now, obviously, the characteristic of risk-free portfolio is that it is going to have a fixed payoff. The payoff is going to be certain in future, irrespective of what the share price is, right? So in our binomial model, if you recollect, we had two possible share prices at t equal to 6. One was 55, the other was 45. This portfolio that we constructed using options and shares is going to have a certain payoff. By certain, I mean it's going to have a fixed payoff. There's going to be no variability in cash flow at the end of the maturity of option contract, which is at t equal to 6. Obviously, we're calling it a risk-free portfolio only because the payoff is certain, right? Had the payoff been uncertain, this portfolio itself wouldn't have been called as a risk-free portfolio. And then we find, now that we know the payoff of this portfolio at t equal to 6, we find out the value of the portfolio today, which is basically we have a portfolio's payoff standing at t equal to 6, which is at the maturity of the option contract. We find out the present value of that payoff, which is nothing but the value of portfolio today, right? If you have a certain cash flow which is standing at t equal to 6, when you discount that cash flow from into today's terms, what you arrive is at the present as at the value of the portfolio, right? So what you essentially have to do is now you have to discount the future cash flow, which is standing at t equal to 6, and that future cash flow is risk free. So risk-free cash flows are discounted by risk-free discount rate. Okay. Now, if you actually have understood, we are trying to avoid arriving at a situation where we actually have to use a discount rate which has risk embedded in it, right? Because we do not know how much risk premium needs to be added. So what we essentially did was, one, we constructed a risk-free portfolio using a combination of shares and options. We found out the payoff of that portfolio at t equal to 6. Why did we choose t equal to 6? Because that is the maturity of the option. So we found out the payoff of the risk-free portfolio at t equal to 6. We discounted that payoff, which is standing at t equal to 6, into today's terms to find out the value of portfolio today. Value of portfolio today is nothing but the present value of future cash flows, right? The future cash flow is a certain cash flow standing at t equal to 6. Therefore, by discounting it, you're calculating the value of the portfolio today. Now we know that the combination of option plus share is equal to the risk-free portfolio. Of course, I've not told you, the ratio in which we need to buy or sell options and shares to construct a risk-free portfolio, that we're going to see in detail. But we know that some combination of option and share is actually going to give us a risk-free portfolio. Okay. If you look now, so obviously when when a combination of option and share is going to equal to the risk-free portfolio, the value of the option plus the value of a share is going to be equal to the value of risk-free portfolio today, right? So this equation is basically today's equation in today's value. Value of the option today should be equal to the value of the option today plus the value of the share today should be equal to the value of the risk-free portfolio today. If you carefully look at this equation, we know the value of risk-free portfolio today because that is what we calculated in this step. We know the value of share today, right? In our example, the value of share today was 50. So if out of 3 variables, you know 2 variables, you can obviously find out the third variable as a balancing figure. Okay, so this is what we're going to do essentially in delta neutral method. Step number 1, we're going to calculate a risk-free portfolio using a combination of options and shares. Step number 2, we are going to find out the payoff of this risk-free portfolio at t equal to 6. That payoff is actually we're going to prove that it is a risk-free payoff, meaning that that payoff is certain, irrespective of what the share price is at t equal to 6. The cash flow that you're going to get from this combination or the risk-free portfolio is certain. There's going to be no variability. And then you find out the value of the portfolio today. The value of the portfolio today is normal discounting what you see, what you do in equity valuation and bond valuation. Value of the portfolio today is calculated as the present value of the future payoff. The future payoff here is a certain payoff, and that is why while calculating the present value, you don't add any risk premium, you discount it using risk-free rate. Finally, we know that the value of option plus value of share should be equal to the value of the risk-free portfolio. We have found out the value of the risk-free portfolio today. We already know the value of the share. So the value of option essentially becomes a balancing figure. And what we actually wanted to find out was the value of the option, right? I mean, that was the whole point of starting this exercise. Now let's get into details, right? The first two steps basically deal with how to construct a risk-free portfolio. The third one, what we saw was calculating the payoff of the risk-free portfolio and the value of the payoff of the risk-free portfolio today. So if I can actually call it step number 3 and step number 4 are related to calculating the payoff of the portfolio and the value of the portfolio today. The fifth step is calculating the value of the option. Like we saw over here, the value of option is actually calculated as a balancing figure from the value of the portfolio and the value of shares. Okay. So coming to step 1, we need to calculate the delta of the option. Of course, the whole point of having the discussion of about half an hour to 1 hour in the previous lecture was to use that calculation of delta in this method, right? So we saw that delta, a quick recap exactly in a minute. The delta is basically nothing but when share price changes by $1, how much does an option price change by? Delta of a call option is positive, delta of a put option is negative. Negative indicating when share price goes up, the value of a put option falls. When the share price falls, the value of a put option goes up. Okay. For a call option, it's going to be a positive relationship, meaning the share and the option price move in tandem. Okay. And we saw that in a binomial model, delta is calculated as y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Or you can also calculate it as y1 minus y2 divided by x1 minus x2. Have no confusion in that, because when you flip the variables, that is in the numerator, when instead of doing y2 minus y1, if you do y1 minus y2, all that will happen is you will get a negative number in the top, in the numerator, and a negative number also in the denominator. So obviously a negative divided by negative is going to give you a positive number, right? Okay, so have no confusion. You can do y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1, or you can also do y1 minus y2 divided by x1 minus x2. Okay, I'm not really spending time in again showing you the calculation of delta, because we spent enough time. We saw that in a single period binomial model, we could calculate the delta of the call option. I'll just yeah. Okay, so we calculated the delta of the call option. We saw that the delta is 0.7. Meaning of 0.7 is 1. The true meaning is if share price goes up by $1, the value of a call option goes up by $0.7. And in case of put, the meaning of minus 0.3 is if the share price goes up by $1, the value of put falls by $0.3. The reason being the put option now becomes a worse put, right? I mean, it's no longer a good put option, because now it's going further out of the money rather. Deep is when the put option has least probability of getting exercised. That is when you call it as a deep out of the money. But a $1 increase, you cannot really call the put option to be going as deep out of the money. It's going slightly out of the money. Okay, so the step 1 is essentially done. Like, we have calculated the delta of the option. The step 2 is constructing a risk-free portfolio using a combination of shares and options. Okay, there are multiple ways of actually calculating combining shares and options to construct a risk-free portfolio, but this is the most famous approach. For now, I will later elaborate as to how we have arrived at this combination of shares and options. But for now, I would recommend just by heart it. A risk-free portfolio can be constructed by writing a call option and holding delta shares. Again, I'm telling you, like, I have 2 separate slides of alternatives of constructing a risk-free portfolio, but I do not want to actually divert myself into how to construct a risk-free portfolio. So for now, I would say just by heart it for now, that a risk-free portfolio can be constructed by writing one call option, meaning one call option, and holding delta shares. The delta that we actually calculated over here is going into portfolio construction over here, right? In the first, the delta that we calculated in step 1 is essentially being used in step 2. So in our example, but for constructing a risk-free portfolio, what we need to do is we need to write one call option and hold meaning buy 0.7 shares. Okay, now let's not come into an argument of, shares cannot be held in fraction. If you do not want to use decimals, you can interpret it as write 10 calls and hold 7 shares. You multiply both of them by 10, right? But I mean, it's a frequent practice that we do continue to calculate a fractional number of shares. But obviously, when you don't want to work with fractions, you can multiply it in real world also. Of course, you cannot buy 0.7 shares. You can just multiply it by 10 or 100 or whatever the case is based on the number of decimals, right? So for now, but I'm not going to multiply it by 10. It is write one call and hold 0.7 shares. Hold again meaning buy 0.7 shares. Okay. Now the first doubt that I have is, how are you so sure that this is actually a risk-free portfolio? Okay. So now I'm actually going to sit down and prove to you that, right, if you have a portfolio wherein you have written one call option and you're holding or you have bought 0.7 shares, that is actually a risk-free portfolio. Okay. Which means the portfolio is going to have a payoff which is certain, which does not change by a change in share price. Okay. So for instance, in the single, it's the same example. I've just come to a different sheet. Okay. So we had 50 as the share price today. We have 55 as one possible share price, and we have 45 as the second possible share price. What I'm actually going to show you is, if we have a payoff, I'm just deleting what was there earlier. If we have a portfolio wherein we have written one call option and we are holding delta shares, then even if the share price is 55 or if the share price is 45, the payoff from the portfolio, the payoff meaning the future cash flow from the portfolio, is going to be certain. It is not going to be dependent on the fact that it's not going to be dependent on what the share price is going to be after 6 months. Okay. The moment we show that it is not dependent on the share price, it actually means that we are constructing a risk-free portfolio. Basically, the payoff at t equal to 6 is going to be equal whether we are at this node or whether we are at this node. Okay. If that is the case, then it is called as a risk-free portfolio because the payoff is certain. It does not have any variability. Okay. So our portfolio, the delta that we calculated was 0.7. The risk-free portfolio was write a call and hold 0.7 shares, right? Now let's come to the bottom node first. Okay. I have written a call option, right? The call option at the bottom node does not get exercised because the strike price is 48. The share price is less than the strike price. Therefore, the call lapses. So I, as a writer, I do not have to pay anything to the holder of the option, right? The call lapses. Okay. So the payoff from the call option is actually 0. And then I have 0.7 shares with me. So those 0.7 shares is going to have a value of 0.7 into 45, 45 being the current share price at t equal to 6. So if you actually look at it, the value of my portfolio is 31.5. How did we arrive at this 31.5? I'm holding 0.7 shares. One share is of 45 rupees or $45. So 0.7 shares is $31.5. I have written a call option, but that call option does not have any payoff because the call option lapses. Now coming to the upper node, I have firstly written a call option. The call option in this case is exercised, which means I as a writer have to pay the holder the differential being $7 here. Okay. So I have a payoff of $7. So I'm putting a negative because I have to pay, negative indicating an outflow. And I have 0.7 shares, which is now worth 55 per share, right? So the value of the shares is 55 into 0.7. Okay. So if you look at this, the value of the portfolio that I've constructed using writing a call and holding zero point 0.7 shares is actually equal, irrespective of whether the share price is 55 or whether it is 45. Okay, so if you look at it in a way, this 31.5 is a certain cash flow in future. I do not have to look at the share price at all. I know for a fact that at t equal to 6, the value of my portfolio is going to be 31.5, irrespective of what happens to the share price, right? So now what I've essentially done is I've shown you that the portfolio that we have constructed by writing a call option and holding zero point 0.7 shares is actually a risk-free portfolio. Why am I calling it a risk-free portfolio? Because the future payoff is the same whether the share price is 55 or whether the share price is 45. Okay, so do we actually have to show this in the examination? The answer is no. I just wanted to show it because I have to prove it to you that what we have actually constructed was a risk-free portfolio. Now this risk-free portfolio has a payoff of 31.5 at t equal to 6. I want to calculate the value of the portfolio today. The value of a portfolio today is the present value of the future cash flow. Future cash flow being 31.5 at t equal to 6. Now the discount rate that we need to use over here is the risk-free discount rate. Again, why are we using the risk-free discount rate? Because the cash flows are risk-free. Only if the cash flows are risky, we use a discount rate which also includes a risk premium. For instance, in while calculating, the value of a share, you use a risky discount rate or a discount rate which includes risk premium like CAPM or APT, because the cash flows, which is the discount, which is the dividend or the expected sale price, includes an element of risk in it, right? So when you're discounting risk-free cash flow, you need to use the risk-free discount rate. So in this approach, what we have actually done was to avoid using a discount rate which actually should have a risk premium embedded in it. We used a combination of shares and options to construct a risk-free portfolio. Otherwise, we actually saw that we do not have a model as of now to actually calculate the risk premium that is required for entering into options, right? So to avoid going that route, we have chosen an alternative route by constructing a risk-free portfolio. The value of this portfolio today is nothing but the present value of the 31.5, right? And the discount rate or the risk-free discount rate is 5% per annum compounded semi-annually, which is nothing but 2.5% for 6 months. So if I do 31.5 divided by 1.025, this is the value of the portfolio today. This is the value of the risk-free portfolio today. This portfolio consisting of a call option which is written and where we are holding 0.75 shares. Sorry, just give me a minute. Yeah, I think I said 0.75 shares. It is 0.7 shares. I'm not sure if I said 0.7 or 0.75. It's holding 0.7 shares, 0.7 being delta. Okay, so the value of that portfolio today is 30.73. If I come back to the PPT, what we did was first we calculated the delta of the option as y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. Then we constructed a risk-free portfolio. I've not shown you the logic behind how we have arrived at this equation of writing a call and holding delta shares, but I've actually shown you that writing a call and holding delta shares actually gives you a risk-free portfolio. Okay, and don't worry, I would say just by heart it for now, that writing a call and holding delta shares gives you a risk-free portfolio. I then calculated the payoff of this portfolio at the maturity of the option, which came to 31.5. I also showed you that this 31.5 is actually a certain cash flow. In effective, I have actually proved that this is actually a risk-free portfolio. And then we calculated the value of the portfolio today. How did we calculate the value of the portfolio today? We calculated the portfolio by discounting the future cash flow. Future cash flow is certain, and that is the reason we discounted it at the risk-free rate of the return. Now coming to the last step. If a portfolio, obviously, if a portfolio consists of two stocks A and B, the value of stock A plus value of stock B is going to be equal to the value of the portfolio. Value of portfolio is nothing but summation of values of the components of the portfolio, correct? Now the components of the portfolio here include delta shares, which I've bought, and it includes a call option, which I have written, okay? Now the way to look at it is, to get a cash flow of 31.5 at t equal to 6, I need to pay 30.73 today. This 30.73 is actually a cash outflow today to get a payoff of 31.5 at t equal to 6. Obviously, when you're, let's say, if you're receiving coupons and face value at the end of bond maturity, you have to pay the bond price today to receive those coupons in future, right? And few coupons as well as the face value. Similarly, to receive this 31.5 in future, you need to pay 30.73 today. So the cost of the portfolio today is 30.73. Okay, and this is a cash outflow expected today. Now, this 30.73 of cash outflow should be equal to the cash outflow that you will actually incur on the net cash outflow that you would actually incur for buying the components of the portfolio. The components of the portfolio meaning nothing but the delta shares and a call option. But remember, we have actually written a call option. We have not bought a call option. If you had bought a call option, you would have a cash outflow. But since you're writing a call option, you're actually going to have cash inflow. Okay. Whereas for buying delta shares, you will have a cash outflow. Now the thing is, we're going to have a cash outflow for buying delta shares, and we're going to have a cash inflow for writing a call option. And the net cash outflow or cash inflow, obviously it's going to be net cash outflow, should be equal to the cash outflow of 30.73. Okay. Now we know what the value of a share today is. It is $50. And the value of 0.7 shares will be 50 into 0.7. Therefore, for buying delta shares today, which is for buying 0.7 shares today, you need to pay 35. And for buying a portfolio, which includes this delta shares and a written call option, you need to pay 30.73, right? So obviously the premium that you're receiving for writing the call option is 35 minus 30.73, which is 4.27. I'll repeat the last 2 minutes once again. One, we saw that the value of portfolio is obviously supposed to be equal to the value of the components of the portfolio, which is value of a portfolio should be equal to value of A plus value of B, provided where you are buying both A and B. In this case, we're actually buying delta shares and we are selling a call option. Okay, so while buying delta shares, we're going to have a cash outflow, whereas when we are selling a call option, we're going to have a cash inflow. The net cash outflow from buying delta shares and selling a call option or writing a call option, selling a call option and writing a call option are the same. Okay, so the net cash outflow for buying delta shares and selling a call option should be equal to the net cash outflow that was incurred for buying the portfolio. So the net cash outflow that we incurred for buying the portfolio was 30.73. The cash outflow for buying delta shares was 35. So obviously the amount that I received for writing a call option is 4.27. Okay. So what we have now done is, given the fact that, the value of a share today is 50, we know that there are two possible prices of 55 and 45. This assumption of having only two possible prices is unrealistic. The strike price of 48 and a risk-free rate of 2.5% for 6 months or 5% per annum compounded semi-annually, we have calculated that the value of the option over here today is actually 4.27. This is what we have done. Given the constraints that we have calculated that the value of the option today is 4.27. By constraints, I mean nothing but the strike price of 48, risk-free rate of 5%, current share price of 50, and two possible share prices of 55 and 45. Obviously, this 4.27 is going to lie between 0 and 7 that you see over here. Okay, because this call option is essentially giving you a payoff of either 0 on future or 7. Okay, so you're going to have a value of a call option today, which is going to lie in between 0 and 7. It cannot lie above 7 or it cannot obviously go below 0. Okay, so this is how we have calculated the value of a call option. Again, going back to the PPT, let me just quickly, just repeat. One, we calculated the delta as y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. We got a figure of 0.7. Then we constructed a risk-free portfolio by writing a call option and buying 0.7 shares, writing a call and buying 0.7 shares. Then we calculated the payoff of the portfolio at future, and I showed you that the payoff is going to be the same whether the share price is on the upper side or whether the share price is on the downside. So this payoff is actually a risk-free payoff, which essentially means that the portfolio that we constructed is actually a risk-free portfolio. Then we calculated the value of the portfolio today, which is the present value of the 31.5 standing at t equal to 6. That came to about 30.73. Agreed? And then we calculated the value of option today as a balancing figure, because the value of the components of a portfolio is going to be equal to value of the portfolio itself, right? So obviously, just to maybe with the only hiccup that you guys might have over here is the option is not a bought option, it is a sold option, right? So for instance, if I step back, let's say you have two stocks, stocks A and stock B. Sorry, I'm again writing with this. Okay, so now let's say the value, you have bought stock A, bought meaning you have paid cash today, and you have shorts, you've done short selling of stock B, wherein you have actually received money. Okay, so you have actually bought stock A, wherein you have paid cash, and you have short sold stock B, wherein you have received 1 lakh. Okay, the outflow is actually equal to 0 today for you. Okay, the value of your portfolio today is also equal to 0. The value of portfolio today is actually going to be equal to value of A, which is your portfolio, which is your long stock, less value of B, because you have actually sold B, right? So when the components actually do not involve, when they involve one bought and one sold, you're obviously going to net them down to find out the value of the portfolio today, because the 1 lakh that you have received on B is more like a short sale liability, because you have to buy that stock in future and return that stock from whom you have borrowed, right? So the value of portfolio is where you have one stock sold and one stock bought, one stock short sold rather, and one stock bought is value of A minus value of B. Okay. Similarly, over here, you have the option being sold. Instead of stock being sold, you have an option being sold. So the value of the portfolio today is going to be the value of the delta shares less the value of the call option that you have written. Okay. So if I need to, over here, if I have to spend 30.73 to construct a portfolio of that, to construct a portfolio consisting of a call option which is written and 0.7 shares bought, then out of that, I will have to pay 35 for buying the shares, and then I will receive a balancing figure, what we calculated as a balancing figure, as the value of the option today, which is nothing but the premium that I am receiving as a writer of the option to when entering into the contract with the holder. So the holder is going to pay the writer $4.27 or 4.27 rupees. Okay, so that is how we actually look at delta neutral method. I will end the video over here. In the next video, which will be a continuation of lecture 2, I will then show you as to how we construct the risk-free portfolio, and is this the only way of constructing a risk-free portfolio, or are there other methods also for constructing a risk-free portfolio, right? Thank you. Bye.